Well, thank you very much. Wow, it's great to see you here today. I hope you've had a great day. I've had a great day. Anybody here ever lived in North Carolina, where I live? Yeah, one person. You can be my interpreter, okay? All right, this first session, I want to talk about the most important word in the English language and the most confusing word in the English language. I say that love is the most important because Jesus said in John chapter 13, verse 34 and 35, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you." And then he said, "This is the way that they will know that you're my disciple, by the way you love each other." In other words, he gave the non-Christian world the right to judge whether or not we're truly following Christ by whether or not we love each other. I think it's the most important word. Most confusing word because we use the word love in 1,000 ways. We say, for example, I love hot dogs. I love pizza. I love the mountains. I love the beach. I love my new car. I love my dog. And then we say to a special someone, I love you. What is that supposed to mean? Hot dogs? Pizza? I'm not going to talk about 1,000 ways that we use the word love. I'm going to talk only about 3 ways that we use the word love, and I'm going to focus on the third of these. I want to begin by talking about what we typically call falling in love. I doubt that you've ever heard a lecture on falling in love. And yet, many of you have experienced it. Some of you have heard about it, and you're hoping someday you will. But I want to say just a little word about this because I think it's misunderstood sometimes. This kind of love begins with a feeling. I call it the tingles. We see someone and there's something about the way they look, the way they talk, the way they emote that just gives you a warm, tingly feeling. And you want to see them again. And every time you get together, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And it literally becomes an obsession. You can't get them off your mind. You go to bed thinking about them. You wake up thinking about them. All day long you think about them. They are the most wonderful person you have ever met in your life. Now, your mother can see their flaws. Your mother will say, honey, have you considered that they haven't had a steady job in 5 years? And you will say, Mama, they're just waiting for the right opportunity. But you know what no one ever told me about falling in love? I remember I fell in love. Yeah, I had those same feelings. But nobody ever told me this. But we know now, we've studied it. The average lifespan of that euphoric feeling is 2 years. Some a little longer, some a little less, average 2 years, and we come down off the high. Now let's be glad we come down, because if we didn't, you'd have to close down business, industry, church, education. You can't get much done when you're in love. But I was always told, if you got the right thing, it's going to last forever. I didn't know you came down. And my wife and I had dated 2 years before we got married. I came down pretty soon after the honeymoon. And everything my mother had told me about her was true. And not only that, but I discovered that we didn't agree on a lot of stuff. And we didn't know how to solve conflicts because when you're in love, you don't think you'll have any. And we ended up arguing because I knew I was right. She knew she was right. I remember one night we were in the middle of an argument. It was raining outside. And in the middle of the argument, she walked out the front door, slammed the door, and walked out into the rain. And I thought, man, this is bad. When a woman walks in the rain, it's bad. I wish someone had told me about that. I wish they'd told, if I knew it was coming, I was going to come down, I think I could have handled it better. And that's why when I wrote a book called Things I Wish I'd Known Before We Got Married, I say one of the things is I wish I'd known there's 2 stages of romantic love. There's the in-love stage, and then there's another stage that I'm going to talk about later. I wish I'd known that, and I wish I'd known how to solve conflicts. I wish they'd have told me I was going to have conflicts, and I could have learned how to do that beforehand. So, when I speak on college campuses, I say, listen, the time to prepare for marriage is not after you get engaged. It's now. Learn what you can now. And, this class y'all have on pre-marriage, that's wonderful. You might even take it hoping you'll find somebody someday. I don't know how that works in the course, but anyway. And people have asked me if this kind of love is in the Bible, and it is. It's found in the Song of Solomon for one place. It's the book we don't read in church. But you read it. I'll let you read it. I won't take time to read it. You read chapter 4, you'll see a woman in love. And at the end of everything else, she says, he is altogether lovely. And then you read chapter 5, and there's a man in love. And he says, you are all beautiful, my darling, all beautiful. That's the way you feel when you're in love. Now, I'm not going to talk a lot about that, but I do think what I've said is important, and I hope you'll help young people as they come along, kind of let them know what that's all about and that it is temporary. And you ought to look at a lot of other things in addition to being in love when you're thinking about getting married. Second kind of love that I want to address is not nearly as exciting, but ultimately far more important, and that is love as an attitude. That doesn't do much for you, does it? An attitude is a fixed way of thinking, and the attitude of love is opposite of the attitude of selfishness. You see, when we have an attitude of selfishness, we are thinking about everything in our lives, what can I get out of this? And we're in a relationship, we're thinking, what can I get out of this? Love is the opposite. Love is an attitude that if you're in a relationship, you're thinking, how can I enrich your life? What can I do that might help you become the person you want to become? It's an attitude. We choose our attitudes. We don't choose falling in love. You don't get up one day and say, I think I'll go fall in love today. No. We don't choose it. It just happens. But we choose our attitude every single day. I'm not going to talk a lot about this kind of love because we talk about this in church. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Have an attitude of what can I do to enrich my neighbor's life. So I'm not going to talk a lot about it. I'll come back to it maybe toward the end. But I want to move to the third way that we use the word love. And again, it's one that we don't talk about much in church. And that is the emotional need for love. Love as an emotional need. Almost everyone agrees that one of our deepest emotional needs on the human level is the need to feel loved by the significant people in our lives. I like to picture inside every child, there's an emotional love tank. And if that love tank is full, that is, the child feels loved, they tend to grow up emotionally healthy. But if the love tank is empty and they don't feel loved by their parents, they tend to have a lot of internal emotional struggles. And in the teenage years, they likely will go looking for love, often in all the wrong places. But I believe that adults also have an emotional love tank. And if you're married, the person you would most like to love you is your spouse. And if you feel loved by your spouse, life is beautiful. But if the love tank is empty and you feel like they don't love me, they wish they weren't married to me, life begins to look pretty dark. So what I want to talk about is, how do you keep love alive in a romantic relationship, a marriage relationship? How do you keep it alive after you come down off the high? And the question to parents is not, do you love your children? We love our children by nature. The question is, do your children feel loved? Is that need being met? Now, the difficulty in doing this in a marriage relationship is that we've made an assumption that what makes one person feel loved will make another person feel loved. And that's a false assumption. Never forget the day I first encountered this. Years ago, a couple came into my office. I didn't know them, never met them. I found out they'd been married to each other for 30 years. They sat down, And the wife started talking immediately, and she said, Dr. Chapman, before we start, let me just tell you a little bit about us. She said, we don't argue. We don't believe in arguing. We don't have any money problems. She said, I was reading an article that said money's the biggest problem in marriage. She said, not for us. And she went on with 2 or 3 more positive things, and I was beginning to wonder, did they come in here to tell me what a good marriage they have? But then she started crying. And she said, but Dr. Chapman, the problem is, I just don't feel any love coming from him. We're like roommates. We live in the same house. He does his thing, I do my thing. There's nothing going on between us. And I just feel so empty inside, and I don't know how long I can go on like this. Well, I looked over to her husband, and he said, I don't understand her. I do everything I can to show her that I love her. She said, turn tells you what she's been telling me. She doesn't feel loved. He said, I don't know what else to do. I said, well, what do you do to show your love to her? He said, well, I get home from work before she does, so I start the evening meal. He said, some nights I have it ready when she gets home. If not, she'll help me. And then we eat. And he said, after we eat, he said, I wash the dishes. And every Thursday night, he said, I vacuum the floor. And every Saturday, I mow the grass, and I wash the car, and I help her with the laundry. And he went on. I was beginning to wonder, what does this woman do? It sounded to me like he was doing everything. And I looked back at her, and she started crying again. And she said, Dr. Chapman, he's right. He's a hard-working man. She said, but we don't ever talk. We haven't talked in 20 years. He's always mowing the grass, washing the dishes. You understand what's going on? A sincere husband who is doing everything he knows to do to show his wife that he loves her, and a wife who doesn't get it emotionally. And after that, I heard similar stories over and over in my office. And I knew there had to be a pattern to what I was hearing, but I had no idea what it was. Until eventually, I took time to sit down and read several years of notes that I made when I was counseling, and asked myself the question, when someone said, my spouse doesn't love me, what did they want? What were they complaining about? And their answers fell into 5 categories. And I later called them the 5 love languages. And I started using that in my counseling. That if you want her to feel loved, you've got to learn how to express love in her love language. And if you want him to feel loved, you've got to learn how to express love in his language. And I would help them discover each other's language, challenge them to go home and try it, and sometimes they would come back in 3 weeks and say, Gary, this is changing everything. The whole climate's different now. And then I started using with small groups of couples, and the same thing would happen. Probably 5 years later, I thought, if I could put this concept in a book and write it in the language of the common person, maybe I could help a lot of couples that I would never have time to see in my office. Little did I know that it would sell, as was said earlier, 20 million copies, be translated in over 50 languages all over the world. And every year, it's been out for 30 years now, every year it sells more than the year before. That doesn't happen to books. People have asked me, Gary, how do you explain that? And I say the short answer is God. And the long answer is God. That's all I know. I think what's happened on the human level is couples read it, the lights come on, they realize how they've been missing each other emotionally, and they take the quiz, they learn each other's language, they start speaking it, the love tank begins to fill up, and then they want their brother and his wife to read it, the sister and her husband, their mother, their daddy, and it's gone word of mouth all over the world. So I want to share with you in this session the 5 love languages. If you've read the book, it'll be a review. If you haven't read the book, it'll be an introduction, okay? Number one, and these are in no particular order of importance. Number one, words of affirmation. And incidentally, all of these are found in the Bible, which leads me to say this. If you discover something in social research, if it's really true, you'll find it illustrated in the Bible, because truth will never contradict truth. 1 Corinthians chapter 8 and verse 1 says, love edifies, or love builds up. So one way to express love is words of affirmation, words that build up the other person. You look nice in that outfit. I really appreciate what you did. You know, one of the things I like about you is just using words to express something that you genuinely appreciate about the other person. Now, I had a lady say to me some time ago, she said, Dr. Chapman, you know, I know it would be good if I could give my husband some positive words. She said, but to be honest with you, I can't think of anything good to say about the man. And I said, well, does he ever take a shower? And she said, well, yes. I said, how often? She said, every day. I said, if I were you, I'd start there. Honey, I appreciate you taking a shower. I said, there are men who don't. I've never met a man and never met a woman you couldn't find something good to say about them. You see, Proverbs chapter 18 and verse 21 says this, life and death is in the power of the tongue. You can kill people by the way you talk to them. You can kill a child. You can kill a spouse. You can kill a friendship by the way you talk, or you can give them life. And love chooses to give life and to look for things that you can honestly affirm about the other person. Second love language is gifts. Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 25 says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. Listen, and gave himself for it. The greatest gift that ever could have happened. He's not talking about, husband, get the tingles for your wife, like Christ has the tingles for the church. No. He's not talking about that. He's talking about you have the attitude toward your wife that Christ has toward the church, and he gave his life for the church. So he's talking about the gift. In the book of James, it says, all good gifts come down from the Father of lights. God is a gift-giving God, and we're made in God's image. And therefore, gifts is one of the ways that we receive and give love. It's universal to give gifts. My background before I studied counseling and theology was cultural anthropology. I did an undergrad and a master's in cultural anthropology, studying cultures all over the world. We've never discovered a culture where gift giving is not an expression of love. It's universal. And the gift doesn't have to be expensive. Haven't we always said it's the thought that counts? But I remind you, it's not the thought left in your head that counts. It's the gift that came out of the thought in your head. Yeah. Hey guys, if your wife likes flowers, you can get free flowers. It's springtime. Just go in your backyard and pick one. That's what the kids do. How many mothers have ever received a dandelion? Y'all have dandelions over here, or do you have another name for it? Yeah. Well, the kid goes out there, he's fascinated, he just brings it and gives it to mama. Now, if you don't have any flowers in your backyard, check out your neighbor's yard. I don't mean steal the flowers. I mean, you say to your neighbor, you know, my wife likes that kind of flower. I said, can I give you $5 for that flower? I can almost guarantee your neighbor will say, man, I don't want your money, take the flower. Or you could go to a funeral. I did that not long ago. I was out at the cemetery and service was over and the family was leaving and there was flowers on the casket. And some of the family members, as they were leaving, were pulling out a rose, and one of them said to me, Dr. Chapman, would you like to have a rose? I said, I certainly would, thank you. I took that thing home, gave it to my wife. I told her where I got it, she still liked it. You can pick up a stone in a city parking lot and take it home and give it to an 8-year-old boy and say, hey man, I found this today and I wanted you to have it. Look at the colors in this thing, man. If gifts is his love language, you'll find that stone in his dresser drawer when he's 23 and he'll remember the day you gave it to him. It's powerful for some people. It may be as simple as a candy bar. You know it's their favorite candy bar. You're just shopping, you just buy them their candy bar. Simple little things. Gifts. Number 3, acts of service. Acts of service. Doing things to serve the other person. 1 John chapter 3 and verse 18. Love not only in words, but in deeds. Show your love by doing something. Now, in a marriage, that is such things as cooking a meal. That is a huge act of service, cooking a meal. Anybody here still cook? Yeah, some of you. My son didn't get married till he was 34. People would ask him, when are you going to get married? When are you going to get married? He would say, when you grow up in the home of a marriage counselor, you're very careful. But he eventually got married, and he came home, he said, Dad, I got a bonus when I married Amy. I said, really? He said, yeah, Dad, she likes to cook. I never thought I'd find a girl in my generation that likes to cook. And then my daughter married a man that likes to cook. My kids got it made on the cooking deal. Washing dishes is an act of service. Who does that at your house if you're married? If you're single, I guess you do it yourself, right? Yeah. Vacuuming the floor is an act of service. Who does that at your place? Yeah. Some of you hire people to do it, I know. Washing the car, walking the dog, mowing the grass, changing the baby's diaper. Woo, that's a big one. Remember the old saying, actions speak louder than words. That's true if this is your love language. It's not true for everyone, but it is true if this is your love language. Actions speak louder than words. Then number 4 is quality time. Quality time. Mark chapter 3, verse 14 says this of Jesus. He ordained 12. We call them the 12 disciples. Now listen, that he might be with them. Jesus preached to multitudes, but he gave quality time to 12 men. Can you imagine hanging out with Jesus those 3.5 years? How much time they spent together? He would teach, and then they would say, what did you mean by what you said to all those people? He explained it to them. Undivided attention with Jesus. That's a model for us. Now, in a marriage, I'm not talking about a husband and wife sitting down and watching television together. Someone else has your attention. I'm talking about the TV's off, computers down. We're not answering our phone. We're giving each other our undivided attention. I challenge couples every day, have a sit down and listen time with each other. And the minimum, this is like vitamin C, the minimum, tell me 3 things that happened in your life today and how you feel about them. And if you're dating, that's a good thing to do too. If you have a good friendship, that's a good thing to do. Give them your undivided attention. Just talk about what's going on in your life and what are you feeling throughout the day. It's a good way to build this into the relationship, giving them quality time. Can I just throw this out to moms and dads? If you have children still at home and you're having a conversation with one of your children and your cell phone rings and you answer it, you just communicated to that child, somebody out there is more important than you. I know that's not what we believe, but that's what the kid gets the feeling. Now, I understand if you're a fireman or you're a policeman or you're a doctor and you have to be on call, an emergency, I understand that. So you have to take the call. And you just say to the child, listen, this is an emergency, I have to answer, but hang on, I want to finish our conversation. Give those children undivided attention. And number 5 is physical touch. Physical touch. Mark chapter 10, verses 13 through 16. Jesus was preaching to the multitude, and people started bringing their little children to Jesus. And the disciples rebuked them. No, this is for adults. And Jesus said to them, hey guys, let the children come to me, for of such is the kingdom of God. And the next verse says he put his hands on them and blessed them. In fact, if you follow Jesus throughout his lifestyle, you will see he's touching people all the time. Physical, many of them, he's healing them with a touch. Physical touch. In fact, why don't you just reach over and touch the person beside of you right now? Yeah. Okay. Some of you say, oh, no, don't do that. Don't touch me. And some of you thought, that feels good. All right. Okay, break it up. Now listen to me carefully. Married or single, listen to me carefully. Out of those 5 love languages, each of us has what I call a primary love language. One of the 5 speaks more deeply to you emotionally than the other 4. Now, we receive love in any way. We're not going to turn away any one of these. But if we don't receive love in our primary language, we won't feel loved. Very similar to spoken language. Every one of us grew up speaking a language with a dialect. We call it our native tongue. It's the one we understand best. I grew up speaking English, Southern U.S. style. Some of you grew up speaking English with a British accent, and others of you have a South African accent, and I could go on and on just looking at you. You come from a lot of places, and that's our native tongue. Well, we have a native tongue when it comes to love. Almost never does a husband and wife have the same love language. It does happen, but not very often. But even if it happens, they will likely have a different dialect. For example, a wife said to me some time ago, she said, Gary, my husband and I have the same love language. I said, wonderful, what is it? She said, acts of service. But, she said, the things I want him to do for me that make me feel loved are different from the things he wants me to do to make him feel loved. Okay? Oh, okay. So, we seldom have the same love language, and if we do, it'll be a different love language. Now, let me just throw this in before I go any further, because a lot of men will hear what I've said so far, and in their mind, they're saying to themselves, I know my love language, physical touch, that's my love language. And they're talking about the sexual part of marriage. And I say, well, maybe that is your love language, but let me ask you a question. Do non-sexual touches make you feel loved? And they look at me like a deer in the headlight. Are there non-sexual touches? I say, well, let me ask you this. If you get out of the car and the two of you are walking into a shopping mall or into a store, and your wife reaches over and holds your hand as you walk in, does that make you feel loved? And if he says, no, that kind of irritates me. I say, well, let's say that she's pouring you a cup of coffee and she puts her hand on your shoulder. Does that make you feel loved? And if he says, not really, I said, physical touch is not your language. You like sex, I understand that, but that's not your love language, okay? So don't assume that all men have physical touch as their love language. That's not true. These are pretty evenly divided. And these are not gender specific. A man can have any one of the 5, a woman can have any one of the 5, okay? Now, by nature, we speak our own love language. If you don't know anything about love languages, you tend to express your love to the other person in what would make you feel loved. It's precisely what I did when I got married. I didn't know anything about love languages. But I did know that I felt good when people gave me words of appreciation. So I gave my wife words of appreciation. I said, before I came down off the high, I told her how glad I was I married her, how much I appreciated what she did. I probably told her a dozen times a day, I love you, honey. I'm so glad I married you. Love you, love you, love you. And one night she said to me, you keep on saying I love you. If you love me, why don't you help me? And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, you don't ever offer to wash the dishes or vacuum the floors or clean the toilet. I mean, you don't offer to do anything. I didn't say this, but inside I was thinking, woman, what are you talking about? My mama did that. We bring our history with us. If mama did it, we expect her to do it. Hey, guys, you're not married to your mama, So we have to. But by nature, we do express love to the other person in a way that would make us feel loved. So obviously the answer is this: we must learn to communicate love in the other person's language. I say learn because it's a process. If you never receive words of affirmation growing up, it will not come natural for you. You'll have to learn how to do that. You might have to write out some sentences and get in a room by yourself and say them out loud and hear yourself saying some of those things, and then pick up one and go say it to your spouse. But you can learn any one of these love languages. Even if you never received them as a child, you can learn them as an adult. If you understand that I want to meet the need for love in that other person, and with the help of God, I'm going to learn how to speak that love language. And we can, any couple can meet this need and have a wonderful experience and relationship with each other because we do that. Well, how do you discover another person's love language? Well, we mentioned earlier there is a quiz that you can take. It's a free quiz at 5lovelanguages.com, the number 5lovelanguages.com. In fact, my publisher told me just today, 115 million people have taken that free quiz. And when I heard about that, I said, my publisher, you guys should have been charging $1 a piece. They said, no, we just want people to get it, okay? But let me give you 3 informal ways. Number 1, observe the other person's behavior. How do they express love to other people? How do they express love to you? If they're always giving other people affirming words, very likely that's their language. If they're always buying gifts for people, there's a good chance that's their love language. Not always. About 75% of the people, what you observe them doing for others is what they want to receive. And listen, if you have children, you can discover a child's love language by the time they're 4 years old, observing their behavior. My son's love language is physical touch. When he was that age, I would come home from work, he would run to the door and grab my legs and climb on me. He's touching me because he wants to be touched. Our daughter never did that. At that age, she would say, Daddy, come into my room, I want to show you something. She wanted quality time. So you observe your children. It's not that hard to figure out what their language is, even at that age. And then a second thing is this. What do they complain about? What do they complain about most often? You see, if your spouse is saying, I just feel like we don't have any time together anymore. I just feel like we're ships passing in the night. They're telling you that quality time is their language. If you go on a business trip and come home and they say, you didn't bring me anything? They're telling you gifts is their language. If they say, I don't think you would ever touch me if I didn't initiate it, they're telling you physical touch is their language. You see, we get defensive when a person complains about something, but they're really giving us valuable information. And then the third question is, what do they request most often? What do they request most often? For example, our daughter in the teenage years, her common request was, Dad, can we take a walk after dinner? She's asking me for quality time. My son would never walk with me. He said, walking is dumb. You're not going anywhere. If you're going somewhere, drive. What he would request is, Dad, can we play basketball in the backyard? And the way we played basketball, it was physical touch, okay? So, now you can find out your own love language the same way. You just do those 3 things with you. What do you typically do? How do you typically express love to people? And what do you complain about? A mother told me the other day, said, Dr. Chapman, my 6-year-old son said to me, we don't ever go to the park anymore since the baby came. His language was quality time. He used to have his mother's full attention at the park, and now the baby's here. He's complaining about it. So you apply those 3 things, and you can pretty well figure out a person's love language. So I want to come back to attitude, because what I've given you is information. But I remember the man who said to me, Dr. Chapman, my wife and I read your book. We took the quiz. Her love language is acts of service. But I'm going to tell you and her, if it's going to take my washing dishes and my vacuuming floors for her to feel love, she can forget that. And I said, that's your choice. If you choose to live with a wife who has an empty love tank, that's your choice. You see, he had the information. He knew how to make her feel loved, but he didn't have the attitude of love. I'm going to do what I want to do. So this is where the whole spiritual dimension comes in. Because God hasn't commanded us to feel a certain way, but he has commanded us to have a certain attitude. And if we come to Christ, remember what Jesus said about himself? The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. If we're following his example, we're asking God to give us an attitude of love toward our spouse, or toward a dating partner, or toward our parents, or toward our other relationships that we have. And if we have an attitude of love, and then we get the information I've given you, we're going to set ourselves with the help of God to do that and to reach out and love that person in a meaningful way. So our relationship with God has a tremendous impact on whether or not we actually practice what I'm sharing today. So as he shared earlier, the original book was for married couples. Then there came the 5 love languages of children for parents, 5 love languages of teenagers for parents. There's even a teens guide to the 5 love language. Imagine if they're reading that while you're reading the teenage book. Man, you would have great conversations. And then we wrote a military edition and how this works in a military set when you're deployed, how you can stay connected, how you can speak these languages when they're deployed, and all that sort of thing. So a lot of books down there you'll find after it's all over tonight. And they're selling them all at a great discount. So this is a wonderful time to make purchase of those. I wrote another little book during the pandemic, 5 simple ways to strengthen your marriage when you're stuck at home together. But those 5 things will work even when you're not stuck at home together. And it's not the love language, it's different things, okay? But a lot of books you're going to find out there. The book we sell most at my marriage conferences is the book is simply called Anger. Because most of us could use a little help on handling anger. I have to be honest with you, I never had a problem with anger until I got married. And I didn't have a super problem with anger until I had a teenage son. And when he and I got into it, yelling and screaming at each other, I asked myself, where did he learn that? And I realized he learned it from me. And there was a radical change in my relationship when I apologized to him and told him no father should ever speak to a son the way I spoke to you. And we both cried and we forgave each other. And I said, Derek, why don't we try to learn how to talk our way through anger rather than yell our way through anger? So if you ever get angry at me, you just say, Dad, I'm angry. Can we talk? And I'll sit down and listen to you. And if I'm angry, I'll say, Derek, I'm angry. Can we talk? Most of us could use a little help in that department. Okay, we got started late, so we're going to take a 5-minute break. My goodness, I've gone longer than I was supposed to go. We're going to take a 5-minute break. Let's just stand and stretch. We don't have time to go to the restroom. Just stretch, okay? Just stretch. All right.